I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey Patriot Warrior fam, I'm Face, and these are the histories that America forgot. According to Wikipedia, quote, "The Battle of Plattsburgh, also known as the Battle of Lake Champlain, ended the final British invasion of the northern states of the United States during the War of 1812. Two British forces, an army under Lieutenant General Sir George Prevost, and a naval squadron under Captain George Downey, converged on the lakeside town of Plattsburgh, New York. Plattsburgh was defended by New York and Vermont militia and detachments of regular troops of the United States Army, all under the command of Brigadier General Alexander Macomb, and ships commanded by Master Commandant Thomas McDonough. Downey's squadron attacked shortly after dawn on the 11th of September 1814, but was defeated after a hard fight in which Downey was killed. Prevost then abandoned the attack by land against Macomb's defenses and retreated to Canada, stating that even if Plattsburgh were captured, any British troops there could not be supplied without control of the lake. When the battle took place, American and British delegates were meeting at Ghent in the Kingdom of the Netherlands, attempting to negotiate a treaty acceptable to both sides to end the war. The American victory at Plattsburgh and the successful defense at the Battle of Baltimore, which began the next day, and halted British advances in the mid-Atlantic states, denied the British negotiators leverage to demand any territorial claims against the United States on the basis of uti possidetis, i.e. retaining territory they held at the end of the hostilities. The Treaty of Ghent, in which captured or occupied territories were restored on the basis of status quo ante bellum, i.e. the situation as it existed before the war, was signed 3 months after the battle. However, this battle may have had little or no impact in advancing the objectives of either side. On the 31st of August, Prevost began marching south. Macomb sent forward 450 regulars under Captain Sproul and Major John E. Wool, 110 riflemen under Major Daniel Appling, 700 New York militia under Major General Benjamin Moores, and 2 6-pounder guns under Captain Leonard, to fight a delaying action. At Chazy, New York, they first made contact with the British. Slowly falling back, the Americans set up roadblocks, burned bridges, and mislabeled streets to slow down the British. The British nevertheless advanced steadily, not even deploying out of column or march, or returning fire, except by flank guards. When Prevost reached Plattsburgh on the 6th of September, the American rear guards retired across the Saranac, tearing up the planks from the bridges. Prevost did not immediately attack. On the 7th of September, he ordered Major General Robinson to cross the Saranac, but to Robinson's annoyance, Prevost had no intelligence on the American defenses, or even the local geography. Some tentative attacks across the bridges were repulsed by Wool's regulars. Prevost abandoned his efforts to cross the river for the time being and instead began constructing batteries. The Americans responded by using cannonballs, heated red hot, to set fire to 16 buildings in Plattsburgh, which the British were using as cover, forcing the British to withdraw further away. On the 9th of September, a night raid across the Saranac River by 50 Americans led by Captain George McGlasson destroyed a British Congreve rocket battery only 500 yards from Fort Brown, one of the 3 main American fortifications. McGlasson and his fellow raiders also killed 1 British officer and 6 British troops, while wounding several others. Once all of the British artillery equipment was destroyed, they withdrew safely, having suffered no casualties. While skirmishing and exchanges of artillery fire continued, the British located a ford, Pike's Ford, across the Saranac 3 miles above Macomb's defenses. Prevost planned that, once Downey's ships arrived, they would attack the American ships in Plattsburgh's Bay. Simultaneously, Major General Brisbane would make a feint attack across the bridges over the Saranac, while Major General Robinson's brigade, less 2 of its battalions but reinforced by light infantry companies of several other battalions, would cross the ford to make the main attack against the American left flank, supported by Major General Power's brigade. Once the American ships had been defeated, Brisbane would make his feint attack into a real one. Macdonough had sent some of his gunboats to harass Prevost's advance, but he knew that his fleet was outgunned, particularly in long guns. Therefore, he withdrew to Plattsburgh Bay, where the British would be forced to engage at close range, at which the American and British squadrons would be roughly even in numbers and weight of short-range carronades. He used the time before Downey arrived to drill his sailors and make preparations to fight at anchor. The ships were anchored in line from north to south in order: Eagle, Saratoga, Ticonderoga, and Preble. They all had both bow and stern anchors, with springs attached to the anchor cables, to allow the ships to be slewed through a wide arc. Macdonough also laid out extra kedge anchors from the quarters of his flagship Saratoga, which would allow him to spin the ship completely around. The 10 American gunboats were anchored in the intervals between the larger vessels. Although the British troops and gunboats under Commander Ping were already on the lake and at anchor near Chazy, and had set up a battery on Isla La Motte, Vermont, it took 2 days to tow the frigate Confiance up the Sorrel River from Ile-aux-Noix against both wind and current. Downey finally joined the squadron on the 9th of September. Carpenters and riggers were still at work on the frigate, and the incomplete crew was augmented by a company of the 39th Foot. To Prevost's fury, Downey was unable to attack on the 10th of September because the wind was unfavorable. During the night, the wind shifted to the northeast, making an attack feasible. The British squadron sailed in the early hours of the 11th of September and announced their presence to Prevost's army by scaling the guns, i.e., firing them without shot to clear scale or rust from the barrels. Shortly after dawn, Downey reconnoitered the American dispositions from a rowing boat before ordering the British squadron to attack. Addressing his crew, he told them that the British army would storm Plattsburgh as soon as the ships engaged, quote, "and mind, don't let us be behind," end quote. At about 9 a.m., the British squadron rounded Cumberland Head, close-hauled in line abreast with the large ships to the north, initially in the order Chubb, Linnet, Confiance, and Finch, and the gunboats to the south. It was a fine autumn day, but the wind was light and variable, and Downey was unable to maneuver Confiance to the place he intended, across the head of Macdonough's line. As Confiance suffered increasing damage from the American ships, he was forced to drop anchor between 300 and 500 yards from Macdonough's flagship, Saratoga. He then proceeded deliberately, securing everything before firing a broadside which killed or wounded 1/5 of Saratoga's crew. Macdonough was stunned but quickly recovered, and a few minutes later Downey was killed, crushed by a cannon flung from its carriage by a shot from Saratoga. Elsewhere along the British line, the sloop Chubb was badly damaged and drifted into the American line, where her commander surrendered. The brig Lynette, commanded by Ping, reached the head of the American line and opened a raking fire against the Eagle. At the tail of the line, the sloop Finch failed to reach station and anchor, and although hardly hit at all, Finch drifted aground on Crab Island and surrendered under fire from the 6-pounder gun of the battery manned by the invalids from Macomb's hospital. Half the British gunboats were also hotly engaged at this end of the line. Their fire forced the weakest American vessel, Preble, to cut its anchor and drift out of the fight. Ticonderoga was unable to fight them off, although it was engaged too heavily to support Macdonough's flagship. The rest of the British gunboats apparently held back from action, and their commander later deserted. After about an hour, Eagle had the springs to one of her anchor cables shot away and was unable to bear to reply to Lynette's raking fire. Eagle's commander cut the remaining anchor cable and allowed the brig to drift down towards the tail of the line, before anchoring again astern of Saratoga and engaging Confiance, but allowing Lynette to rake Saratoga. Both flagships had fought each other to a standstill. After Downey and several of the other officers had been killed or injured, Confiance's fire had become steadily less effective, but aboard Saratoga, almost all the starboard side guns were dismounted or put out of action. Macdonough ordered the bow anchor cut and hauled in the kedge anchors he had laid out earlier to spin Saratoga around. This allowed Saratoga to bring its undamaged port battery into action. Confiance was unable to return the fire. The frigate's surviving lieutenant, James Robertson, tried to haul in on the springs to his only anchor to make a similar maneuver, but succeeded only in presenting the vulnerable stern to the American fire. Helpless, Confiance could only surrender. Macdonough hauled in further on his kedge anchors to bring his broadside to bear on Lynette. Pring sent a boat to Confiance to find that Downey was dead and Confiance had struck its colors. Lynette also could only surrender after being battered almost into sinking. The British gunboats withdrew unmolested. The surviving British officers boarded Saratoga to offer their swords of surrender to Macdonough. When he saw the officers, Macdonough replied, quote, "Gentlemen, return your swords to your scabbards. You are worthy of them." End quote. Commander Ping and the other surviving British officers later testified that Macdonough showed every consideration to the British wounded and prisoners. Many of the British dead, not including the officers, were buried in an unmarked mass grave on nearby Crab Island, the site of the military hospital during the battle, where they remain today. Both commanders would have seen the parallels of Macdonough's anchorage on Lake Champlain to that of the French under Vice Admiral François Paul Brueys, opposing British Rear Admiral Sir Horatio Nelson at the Battle of the Nile in Aboukir Bay on the 1st of August, 1798. A study of Nelson's battles was part of the professional knowledge expected of naval commanders, but Macdonough did all that Brueys did not. He expected to take advantage of the prevailing winds on Lake Champlain that constrained Downey's axis of approach. Quote, "Because nearly every circumstance that worked to Nelson's advantage proved disadvantageous to Downey. The Battle of Lake Champlain is sometimes called the False Nile by the English." End quote. The British naval historian William Laird Clouse regarded Macdonough's False Nile victory as, quote, "a most notable feat, one which, on the whole, surpassed that of any other captain of either navy in this war." End quote. Although Prevost's attack was supposed to coincide with the naval engagement, it was slow to get underway. Orders to move were not issued until 10 a.m., when the battle on the lake had been underway for over an hour. The American and British batteries settled down to a duel in which the Americans gained a slight advantage, while Brisbane's feint attack at the bridges was easily repulsed. When a messenger arrived and notified Prevost that Downey's ship had been defeated on the lake, he realized that without the Navy to supply and support his further advance, any military advantage gained by storming Plattsburgh would have been worthless. Prevost considered he therefore had no option but to retreat and call off the assault. Bugle calls ordering the retreat sounded out along the British lines. Robinson's brigade had been misdirected by some British staff officers and missed the ford which was their objective. Once they had retraced their steps, Robinson's brigade, led by 8 companies of light infantry, soon drove the defenders back, and the British had crossed the ford and were preparing to advance, when the orders arrived from Prevost to call off the attack. The light company of the British 76th Regiment of Foot had been skirmishing in advance of the main body. When the bugle calls to retire were heard, it was too late, and they were surrounded and cut off by overwhelming numbers of American militia. Captain John Purchase, commanding the company, was killed in the act of waving a flag of truce, his white waistcoat. 3 officers and 31 other ranks of the 76th were made prisoner. The 76th also suffered 1 other man killed and 3 wounded. Major General Brisbane protested the order to retreat but complied. The British began their retreat to Canada after dark. Although the British soldiers were ordered to destroy ammunition and stores that they could not easily remove, large quantities of these were left intact. There had been little or no desertion from the British Army during the advance and the skirmishing along the Saranac, but during the retreat, at least 234 soldiers deserted. Very few of these desertions were from the Peninsular War veterans or the 2 Canadian units in Prevost's force. Most were from the Regiment de Moiron, which was a mixed bag of several nationalities, the 2nd 8th Regiment, which was a second-rate unit decimated by sickness in the Walcheren campaign, and the 1st 27th Foot, which had been stationed at Malta and had seen action in the abortive siege of Tarragona. The British casualties during the land engagement from the 6th to 11th of September were 37 killed, 150 wounded, and 57 missing. Macomb reported 37 killed, 62 wounded, and 20 missing. But these losses were for the regular U.S. Army troops only. Historian William James remarked that the, quote, general return of loss among the militia and volunteers nowhere appears, end quote. General Macomb wrote to his father that the American loss, quote, in the land of battle, end quote, was 115 killed and 130 wounded, a figure which suggests considerable casualties among the militia and volunteers. Macdonough's victory had stopped the British offensive in its tracks. Also, Prevost had achieved what the U.S. government had been unable to do for the entire war up until that point, to bring the state of Vermont into the war. The British had used their victories at the Battle of Bladensburg and the burning of Washington to counter any American demands during the peace negotiations up to this point, despite the Americans' successful defense at the Battle of Baltimore and the days after this battle, and which ended the British activities in the mid-Atlantic region. American negotiators used the repulse at Plattsburgh to demand exclusive rights to Lake Champlain, and denied Britain's claim of exclusive rights to the Great Lakes. Thus, American actions at Plattsburgh and Baltimore denied the British any advantage they could use to make demands for territorial gains in the Treaty of Ghent, such as a pro-British Indian barrier state in the Midwest, and the New Ireland colony established in the District of Maine. The failure at Plattsburgh, with other complaints about his conduct of active operations, resulted in Sir George Prevost being relieved of command in Canada. When he returned to Britain, his version of events was accepted at first. As was customary after the loss of a ship or a defeat, Commander Pring and the surviving officers and men of the squadron faced a court-martial, which was held aboard HMS Gladiator at Portsmouth between the 18th and the 21st of August, 1815. The court commended Pring and honorably acquitted all of those charged. The dispatches of Sir James Yeo were published about the same time and emphatically placed the blame for the defeat on Prevost for forcing the British squadron into action prematurely. Prevost in turn demanded a court-martial to clear his name, but died in 1816 before it could be held. Alexander Macomb was promoted to Major General and became Commanding General of the United States Army in 1828. Thomas Macdonough was promoted to Captain and given the honorary rank of Commodore, and is remembered as the, quote, hero of Lake Champlain, end quote. To honor the American commanders, Congress struck 4 Congressional Gold Medals, a record number for the time. These were awarded to Captain Thomas Macdonough, Captain Robert Henley, and Lieutenant Stephen Casson of the U.S. Navy, and to Alexander Macomb. Macomb and his men were also formally given the thanks of Congress.
Yeah, let's go. I'm unstoppable, do the impossible. I'm irresponsible, yet I'm phenomenal. I got an arsenal, I'm dropping bombs, you know. No, I'm not stopping, no. go, conquer the obstacle. To the top, here I go, think I'm chosen to be the king of rock, think the people have spoken. I can hear the tick-tock of the clock, I'm in motion. So now I'm gonna pop, causing all this commotion.
Yeah, sometimes I think that I'm unstoppable. Yeah, ready to go, man, lock and load. That's right, I swear to God that I could drop you, bro. Yeah, I got a shot and I ain't stopping, no. That's how I know that I'm unstoppable. That's how I know that I'm unstoppable. Let's go. I don't care what they all say. That's right, I'ma do this thing my way. Let's go. Been grinding hard on it all day. Okay, we work hard, then we all play. Yeah, I'm addicted to the grind, man. That's right, so I refuse to waste time, man. Yeah, one day it all will be fine, man. Let's go. Gotta commit to the climb. You know we're back with the Guinness, setting records every minute, every track. In addiction to the fact that we're winning, still we lack something's missing. Need a track that is hitting, making racks, making millions. Yeah, that's the mission. I don't waste time, no, I make time. All these people wanna hate, fine, I'ma make mine. While you sitting there complaining, I'll be training. While you sitting there just waiting, I'm creating. Yeah, sometimes I think that I'm unstoppable. Yeah,